Here at the British Business Group's annual convention, the focus is on putting the special back into the Indo-British partnership. Let's examine the Indo-British confluence with Sunil Khilnani, who's Avantha Professor and Director of the King's India Institute at King's College London. Professor Khilnani, thank you for your time. Simple, straightforward first thing. I put this phrase to you. The Indo-British confluence. What is it?
Well, I mean, it's clearly historically a very complicated relationship, and I think what we're seeing now is this attempt to turn what historically has been a relationship of, in fact, of servitude, of dominance and servitude, into a friendship, into a partnership. And to be able to do that in 40, 50 years is a challenge. It's a challenge to both sides. And I think we're seeing that underway. We're seeing a kind of seriousness of engagement to some extent, but we're also seeing many missed opportunities. And one of the things that we're trying to do, for example, with the India Institute at King's, is to bring the understanding of India in Britain more in line with how India is today. Because I think there's been a lot of dwelling in Britain on the historical and on the past and on the weight of that relationship. And that's true and that's important. But I think also what many people in Britain haven't necessarily seen so clearly is the vast changes that have occurred in this country. And indeed, many people in India even haven't fully we've noticed it, but we haven't fully absorbed and understood it. So one of the things that the India Institute is trying to do is to generate real analytic understanding of these changes, which will both be of relevance to Britain and to India and to developing the relationship, I think.
So having said that, would you say there's scope to put a special back into this Indo-British relationship? Because everyone's hankering for a special relationship with each other, every major country. India, Britain, special scope.
Yeah, well, it's a bit like the kind of Facebook syndrome, isn't it? Everyone wants to be best friended and liked and thumbs up and so on. And there's a kind of mania about that. And as you say, I mean, whether it's Moscow or Washington or Tokyo or Berlin, everyone is beating feet to the door to say, we're special, we're strategic, we're important. There's an overkill of that. And frankly, that's rhetoric. I don't think, what really matters is what's happening at several levels. What's happening at the trade level, what's happening at the strategic level, and the exchange of sensitive technologies and those kinds of things, which clearly India does need. But also, thirdly, I think what's happening at the level of ideas and at the intellectual level. I do think that's important. I don't think the ideas are the kind of icing on the cake. I think they do drive relationships, and I think therefore the kind of exchanges that India has with the US, with Britain, to some extent with other Asian countries, is actually important because there's an intellectual frame to it, which is lacking in some of the other relationships. For example, with Russia is an important partner, but I can't say we have a real intellectual engagement with it. Whereas I think there is that.
Which we do with Britain.
There is that, absolutely. And so that's a vast bridgehead on which to build. But there's a lot of building that needs to happen.
Well, let's turn our attention to India specifically now and recent events. I'm referring to food security bill, right to education before that, land acquisition, all of these sort of broadly welfare schemes. You could use another description, but reflect on them. Reflect on how they've been designed, the timing, and what their future could be.
Yeah, well, I mean, they have become, I think, the target of a lot of criticism at the moment, partly because the growth path has sort of taken a dip. I think it will be a temporary dip, but it's a serious dip. I think these welfare plans, as you described them, social policy, social provision, were designed at a time when we were on a higher growth expectation. They were drawing on resources that we expected to have in hand. And I think their basic intention is right in the sense that you cannot have a society like ours moving ahead unless you have some basic safety nets for the majority of people, and we don't have that. So I think the intentions have been right, but I think the design, there's a lot one can argue with. I think also one of the important things which we've perhaps been missing is that even more than safety nets, we have to be able to give people their own capacity to enter the economy and to enter the kind of high growth parts of the economy. And that means skills, education, training. It's a well-known thing, we all talk about it, but we're not delivering that in at all the scale and urgency that we need to. And so even more than the welfare provisions, I think if we can focus on how we get people trained and skilled to themselves participate in India's growth and add to it, that really is going to be the essence of it. So I think we can sustain some of the welfare moves that we've committed to, but we have to perhaps bring them in more slowly. We have to perhaps raise expectations more carefully than we're doing at the moment.
Well, you know, I could respond by saying you've got the National Skills Development Council, you've got the right to education. I mean, these are all steps that the government has taken in recent months. Are you saying it's about prioritizing?
I'm saying it's two things. I think it's about prioritizing. Absolutely, those elements need to be right at the top with a really forceful push behind it. And what that'll help with is the second point, which is actually seeing that these things happen. Because yes, we all have a kind of list of what we need to do, what should be done. The government is creating commissions and committees and so on for all of these things. But are they actually achieving what they're supposed to be doing? And I think by making it a priority, by setting very clear deadlines and aims and goals, and then actually going out there and making sure that they're happening. I mean, yesterday I was in Islam, just by the airport here, trying to get kids into school. You know, one sees what the situation is all the time. You know it, we know it. And you know, the municipal schools are failing us, the government schools are failing us, the private schools are stepping into a vacuum and have no real standards necessarily. Parents don't know what they're getting, although they're putting in money to get their kids to school. So there are many, many gaps. So despite the national commissions and so on, it's not actually delivering. And until we feel the urgency of this, until it really makes our skin and you know, hair prickle with the urgency, I don't think we're going to be able to do this properly.
We always, doubt the government's delivery mechanisms, the action on the ground, the ability to get it done. But for a moment, wear a really positive hat and just tell me, is there any sort of initiative or scheme of the government's which has come like top down, which has actually yielded the kind of results that you'd be satisfied with? I know this is a curveball question, but does something come to mind?
Sure, I think there are initiatives. I think, again, it's a varied picture. I mean, some are better put in practice in some states than in others. So for example, you know, some of the educational initiatives, and we know that these are very much state-driven, of course. I mean, if you look at the southern states, yes, they are working. Similarly with health, you know, these are again often state-led initiatives. They come on from directives from the center, but they're put in practice at the state level. And I think that those kinds of policies, where there's a kind of alignment between the intention from the center and a real capacity and will at the state level to push them through, that's when it works. And that's the kind of lesson I think we need to be extending across to the other states, that it can be done. I mean, there's no, you know, why is it that Tamil Nadu, despite the comings and goings of chief ministers and governments, it doesn't matter. The politics, in a sense, can be discounted.
Yes.
Actually, the things get done at the administrative level, at the bureaucratic level, which we often are skeptical about. So I think there is a way in which we can take some of those examples and try to generalize and learn. It's perfectly, we have a huge laboratory in this country from which we can learn both bad and good examples. But I'm not sure we're doing enough of that.
One final question. As we head into the great 2014 general elections, the road to that point and beyond, I mean, what does it look like to you?
Yeah, well, I think to me it looks extremely uncertain and murky. I mean, I think the media rhetoric is all about a clear choice. You know, it's a certain kind of right-wing politics versus a certain kind of left-wing politics, or however you want to portray it, Hindutva versus secularism, etc. The tags we know. I actually think it's going to be a much more complicated set of choices taken at the local level, not around some large ideological banners. And I think what we're going to end up with is a complicated, uncertain coalition which will not really have the will or capacity to take certain big decisions, which we urgently need to face at the moment. So I'm afraid we may see several lost years where we become very inward, where we're trying to figure out our own political alignments and what is sustainable and so on. Something like happened in the mid-90s, where I think we lost some impetus and momentum after an initial opening. And that's not what I would like to see, but I'm afraid that may be something that we're heading for. So I think we need to be prepared to perhaps expect less from government, although again, that's not a good situation to be in given how many big challenges we face.
Terrible timing.
Yeah, it is. We haven't been good on timing in this last decade. We should have sorted out many of our problems during the glory days when things were going well. We were complacent. I think we let time pass, and I think now there's a crunch coming in a variety of different areas.
Well, on that somber note, Professor Khilnani, thank you very much for your insights and for talking to us.
Thank you.